If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you have a wonderful pregnancy and afterbirth experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Well, hello. It is lovely to have you join us this week for another beautiful birth story, which is part of the Spilling the Milk series in this podcast. If we haven't met before, my name is Catherine Bequee. I'm a mum of 3 young girls, a physio for women, and I have an online community, FitNest Mama, which helps to provide pregnant and new mothers with the exercises, support, and resources they need to feel good from the inside out as they prepare for and recover from childbirth. FitNest Mama has workouts that are tired mum friendly, achy mum friendly, and toddler friendly that you can do in the convenience of your home at the end of a long day whilst your bubba sleeps or whilst your toddler is running around causing havoc. So, as I mentioned, I had the pleasure of chatting to Caitlin today. Caitlin is a mama to 1 little man, Hunter, business owner to Living the Abundant Way, and she also has her own podcast, Belly and Beyond, so be sure to check that out. Caitlin is also a lovely member inside FitNest Mama, and she shares her pretty incredible story, which includes having a baby diagnosed with a birth defect with cleft lip and palate. Baby Hunter had 2 plastic surgeries before the age of 1, so they've had a long road with surgeries, and they've got a long road ahead as well with surgeries, gum grafting, braces, and a potential palate break and speech therapy. She describes the moment that she was taken into NICU, how it felt to be by herself whilst her husband had gone with the baby and she'd just given birth. She also describes pumping milk for 12 months and all the ups and downs that came with that. She discusses how she wasn't able to breastfeed and the emotional pain that caused her. She discusses how she's built her business alongside this huge life shift. She discusses how she's called in and arranged for support services, a doula, cleaners, online shopping. So finally, Caitlin shares how FitNest Mama has helped her in her postnatal journey, and in particular how she loved the stretches and exercises which were designed to help ease those aches that new mums do often have with so much holding and nursing of their baby. So sit back and relax, and I do hope you enjoyed this birth story, Spilling the Milk with Caitlin. Hello, Caitlin. Thank you for joining me today on the FitNest Mama podcast. It's great to finally chat. Could you please introduce yourself to start off with? Let us know a little bit about who you are and your motherhood journey. And yeah, let's start from the start.
Hi, well, I'm Caitlin. People call me Katie. I'm currently in Queensland, the northern part of Australia, and I left Sydney on June 22nd, basically in a bit of a rush because Sydney 2.0 hit. I think that was like Victoria already 7.0. I don't even know anymore. But regardless, it was a crazy season. So we wanted to go on a road trip prior to even knowing that this second round of COVID was going to hit. And we'd already started making plans to hit the road and put all our house into storage. So we did all of that. So I am still literally living out of my car, basically. We house sit and Airbnb while raising my 20-month-old little boy, who I'm going to talk about today. And then between my husband and I, we run 3 companies. Our life is so intense, trying to do it all until just recently without any support services. And I desperately miss grandma and date nights. So that's me in a little bit of a nutshell.
Oh my gosh, that could be a whole podcast episode, just diving into your life without even touching on your son. Tell me, are you moving from place like city to city, like town to town? What's happening? Or are you staying in one place and just moving houses?
Well, we were obviously concerned when we left Sydney. We left with literally 10 minutes to spare, and we basically went and resided out in the bush for a couple of days just to like deregulate after the stress of trying to get out before like speed cameras caught us at the wrong time. Like, it was so intense. And then we realized we left after the date. So we had to backdate when we left Sydney, and essentially we had to go into a self-quarantine for 2.5 weeks. When we found that out, we were getting close to Coffs Harbour. We luckily had friends there with this beautiful new built house, and we got to reside in the bottom part of the house, which backed onto a private access to a beach, which literally saved our life, because I don't know what we would have done in a studio motel for 3 weeks with a 20-month, or he was just over 1 then. It would have been horrible. So we got through that. We made our way to Byron. We saw our friends, and we basically frantically got permission to cross into the Queensland border, knowing what was coming and it was going to close. As soon as we crossed into Queensland, we've never left the state of Queensland. And we ended up taking our time, because we have a baby and you have to stop once they wake up and find a hotel or a motel. And we basically went all the way up to the Daintree rainforest, and we went from house sit to house sit to house sit. So we pre-booked house sits in advance through a site called Mind a Home. You pay like $50 for an annual fee, and you basically look after people's prized possessions, which often are more important than their own children, pets. So we looked after dogs, cats, alpacas, chickens, like farms, countrysides, beachsides. Like, we have seen the full geography of Queensland. The only downside is you have to do nice exit cleans, as in return the home how you found it, which means if you go there for a week, you settle in, make mess, and then you have to do a deep clean, which most mums only want to do like every 1 to 2 months, but we do them every 8 to 10 days.
Oh my gosh. Let's go back to the start of the journey, because I guess that's why we have you on here, is to chat about your experience in terms of becoming a mother. And I know yours is a bit of a different experience, which is why I've asked you to come on today. Did you mean to fall pregnant? Like, was it planned? How was the process of falling pregnant?
I wasn't trying. I feel like we got blessed and stitched up in the best possible way. But I say that respectfully, and I'm very careful when I share that part of my story, because I'm very aware that that is not the story for other women, and it can take time for other women. Hearing women say, oh yeah, I just felt pregnant, I didn't want to, can just be like a real cut to the guts. But for me, my particular journey was I had to go on a process of actually surrendering and accepting not only my body, but the fact that my life was now going to be forever different. And I wasn't really in the place that I was wanting to do that. I was still feeling like I just wanted to be in a love bubble with my husband. I wanted to travel. I wanted to go to America and have cocktails on the rooftop in New York, except I sat there feeling sick, nauseous, and didn't drink anything. So I was a little bit annoyed. And as you know, we haven't traveled since. So that was my last chance to travel in all this mess. And I did it rather tired and sick. But I did spend some time processing the fact and got to a place, hang on, this is a gift. This is a blessing. Regardless of the timing, this is obviously what's meant to be for our season. And of course, when he was born, it was right in the thick of the first COVID big outbreak, and I wanted to go to Europe that year for my 30th and go to Spain, and I wouldn't have been going anyway. Instead, I spent my postpartum hidden away in my family home. But yes, at 20 weeks, I did find out, in fact, that my son had a birth defect, comes under the birth defect category, which is a left cleft lip, which basically means at 6 weeks, his lip, gum and palate did not join. And you can imagine at 6 weeks, like, you don't know anything. Most people don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. They haven't even realized they've missed their period yet sometimes. So like, it's very hard to like assess why this happens. And I spent many months going around in my head trying to figure out why this happened to us, and medically, why did this happen? I'm a very healthy person, so it kind of really got to me. But yes, we went on this huge journey of now really reconciling with the fact that I was going to be a hospital mum, and I was going to be that mum that has to go to appointments and specialist appointments, and your whole world changes when you find out this information. Your little motherhood bubble pops.
Yeah, I can really feel for you, because not only were you not expecting to get pregnant, so you were trying to come to terms with your pregnancy, then within a few weeks you found this out. So I can imagine the turmoil that you were in at that stage. How was the rest of the pregnancy?
It started off hard. as you can imagine, I was emotional. I already had all these hormones pumping through my body that was new. I was already nervous about being a mum, and then I had all these additional things. I think you've really got to reconcile with the fact that your child may look different and how you're going to navigate that around friends and family. Like for me, I got through it and I was like, I don't really care what he looks like in the end. I love him so much. But we then started to get a little bit nervous. Well, how are other people going to treat him? How are other people going to feel around him? And of course, the big question mark was, am I going to be able to breastfeed? And, you know, you're a kid, you think you see mums in the park breastfeeding, you think, oh, that's going to be me. You just kind of make all these assumptions about your parenting journey just through naivety, really. And as we know, and you've probably spoken to many mums and know many mums, breastfeeding is no simple thing. It has its all ups and downs and complications, regardless of my situation. That is just breastfeeding. It's something we don't talk about enough. So that was the big thing that was really starting to break my heart. I felt like I'd lost this opportunity before I'd even tried.
So what did they tell you during pregnancy? Did they say that you wouldn't be able to breastfeed? Like, I'm not an expert in this condition. So yeah, do enlighten me. What did they say?
I love the medical space when it's needed, but they also sometimes don't have that gentle touch that's needed for a new mother. And of course, I had a male obstetrician, which is quite common, and they're very straight. They're very black and white. They're very matter of fact. So it was very dogmatic. They can't give you any absolutes about anything. So, you know, they could say, well, if this happens, it could be like this. We don't know the measurements of the clefts. We don't know how extreme it's going to be. And we don't know this, so it's not going to be like this. And you just start to get to a point where there's all these question marks and all these ifs because they can't make any necessarily guarantees. And basically, we couldn't actually assess the actual palate, because to be able to do that inside the womb with a proper scan, he has to be laying back with his head tilted back and his mouth actually open. And like, how many times do you have a scan where a baby does that? Like, it's so hard. And he actually really didn't want us to look at his face. I know that sounds silly, but I went in for like 7 or 8 scans, and it was just so frustrating. We would sit there, then I'd get off the bed, I'd go for a walk to try and get him to move. And every time he would cover his face with his hand or he'd turn his head away, and they literally couldn't get a good shot of his lip, let alone the palate. So what they ended up having to do was go through the top of his head, through all of the layers, and try and ascertain from like a top view how much of a millimeter space there was on the lip. Like, it was really silly. And in the end, they said, there's just no point you coming in anymore. Like, he doesn't want us to see your face. We did all the heart scans, the brain scans. They asked me if I wanted to do any further testing, like genetic testing or any correlations or links to anything else. They also offered me an abortion, even though I was between 22 and 24 weeks. That's legally allowed in New South Wales under a birth defect, which by that point I was highly offended and mortified that I'd even get asked that question, but also had to reconcile that's them doing their job. But I couldn't believe that that was even an option. There was literally nothing wrong with this baby. Like, it was so healthy. There was no reason, nothing. Like, it was just maybe a 1 in 100th or 1,000th chance that it could be connected to something really serious. So it was all these different waves and all this information we had to navigate. And we did indeed meet the surgeon, and she took us through the process of what's surgery like, what's the recovery like, the whole process until they're like 18. Like, you get your kid's whole life in like a medical report in like less than 20 minutes. And you're just like, whoa, let's just take it step by step. I don't think I'm ready to think about my kid when they're 18. They're still growing. So there was a lot we had to kind of medically get through. And I guess to protect my own mental health, I went into a bubble, and I just kind of didn't want to know any more about the information. I just knew he was healthy. And then I went into full birth mode and stopped worrying about the other side.
Yeah. And we've had one other birth story with the lovely Jody. Whoever's listening, if you want to scroll back, and Jody's little baby had a diaphragmatic hernia. So straight after the baby was born, it had to be rushed off to surgery. So although they're totally different stories, I can hear very much similarities. And like, I want to ask about once the baby was born, but once you found out about this situation, did you dive into much birth preparation, or was that not really important for you?
So because I felt like there was things happening out of my control, and as you learn very quickly, lots of things happen out of your control in parenting and you learn to go with the flow. I focused on the things I could control and that could empower me and could impact me in a really positive way. So I actually became obsessed with birth preparation, like obsessed. I fell in love with every aspect. I wanted to empower myself so that I had the most beautiful birth and I could do whatever I could to ensure that I felt heard, that I understood medical lingo, that I knew what happened in the birth room. I hired a doula because I really wanted that extra support. I didn't get into the midwife program because I went overseas the day after I found out I was pregnant for 8 weeks to America and Canada. So I didn't have that access to talking to the hospital. So I actually missed out on getting into the midwife program. So I went into the GP midwife program, which basically meant I didn't have that continuity of care. When I rocked up to have my baby, I got whatever midwife was on duty at the time. So I wanted a consistent person to support me through my pregnancy and my birth and my postpartum. It was just one little thing I felt like that could just help me in amongst all the chaos in my mind. And she was amazing. She just literally made me feel so strong and so courageous. Then her being taken away from me because I had to pick between her or my husband because of the hospital rules. I ended up doing Zoom with her and it didn't matter. I still felt like she was there for me right until she dropped me off at the hospital and obviously took me up and then they kicked her out. And then she was on Zoom and then she was back at our house like a week later and she was there for me for weeks after I actually paid an extra package for her to be there for me for like 10 weeks after Hunter was born. So I really set my life up from postpartum food cooking that lasted me 3 months. We hired a cleaner. I had friends helping me do things. I called in all the support. I just threw out the fear of asking for help because I was like, I can't do this without a tribe. I literally need every single person that's willing to help me. And I just called them all in and got ready for this big journey.
Okay, so you prepared for birth. Amazing. Did you do a few different courses? Like what did you do to prepare for birth?
So I did the She Birth course. I absolutely loved it. I did it in person. I was able to do it in person. You do it with your partner and you do it over 2 days. And that was the greatest thing I've ever done. Like I would even go and do it again for another baby just because I loved it so much. It empowered my husband. He walked out of that weekend and he said to me, I really matter in the birthing space, don't I? I said, you really matter. And he ended up doing more work, I feel like, than my actual midwife when I was birthing. And I saw this huge shift in him and he felt empowered and educated. And I also feel like I walked out and I was like, I'm going to roar this baby out. Like I just felt so confident.
Oh, that's great. And talk us through the moment you realised you were in labour.
I did acupuncture. So I thought acupuncture would be a really good way to bring on my labour. I'm really into natural sources. So I did that 3 times. And then I really wanted my baby born on Easter Sunday. So on the Saturday, I booked acupuncture in the evening with this beautiful lady who had 20 years experience in Chinese medicine. And I said, go hard. I want to be in labor tonight. And she went so hard and it hurt so much. And I literally went into labor 2 to 3 hours later and I lost my mucus plug after having a bath. And I had the baby 24 hours later.
What stage did you go into hospital?
When I got there, I was 5 centimeters. And I, in my head, felt like I was going to be more than that. But then my doula was very kind because there's an extra centimeter that they actually don't tell you about. So really, you're 6, you're doing really well. Just keep going. And that was at 6 p.m. and he was born at 10:15.
So at 10:15, your midwife checked you and you were 5 to 6 centimetres dilated. And then your baby was born 3 hours later. Did you have any pain relief? This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months. Yes, that's 9 months. They also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit at www.babybeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
I had the gas. That was the only pain relief I had. Oh, and I had a bottle of wine at home, a bottle of red wine over 12 hours of labouring at home with a lot of food and a lot of water. I had about 8 litres of water, and I didn't stop eating until I literally got in the car. And by that point, I was starting to really not cope when we were in the car. But I ate for literally 14 hours, everything I could find in the house. And I just filled myself up, and I had sat outside on my patio eating and drinking wine with my husband and my doula for like 3 hours. That actually helped take a bit of the edge off. But when I was actually in the hospital, the only pain relief I used was the gas, and I hated it. It worked, but I hated the feeling of the gas being over my mouth, and I felt like it was muzzling me and I couldn't speak. And that was actually a really hard part for my birth, was allowing these 10 breaths on this gas mask. But it did work, and it did get me through, and I probably wouldn't have coped without it.
And for the pushing phase, did you get the urge to push, or did they tell you when it was time to push? How did that happen?
They were the opposite. I was so annoyed at COVID and the situation of losing my doula that I just didn't stop pushing. I just kept pushing and kept pushing, to the point I remember being on the birthing stool and my husband was behind me, and I was literally pulling down on him. And I remember the midwife looking, she said, if you keep pushing like this, you're going to tear yourself. You need to slow down and listen to me. I remember thinking, I don't want to tear my vagina. I don't want to tear my vagina. I remember thinking, oh shit, I got to listen to her. And I remember that she's like, I only want you to push when I tell you to push. And it was really starting to get to that point where, you're crowning and the head starting to come out. And I just was so over it. I remember saying, I'm just over this. I'm done with this shit. I want to put my pajamas on. Like, I'm freaking over it. And I was like that for 2 hours. I've just kept on saying, I'm over it. And I started getting like visions of me going in and getting a C-section. I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. She ended up just talking me through it, and I just didn't stop pushing. I think that's obviously why he came out maybe a little quicker, because I was just so angry.
Okay, so your baby came out, and what happened with the cleft palate? Was that was the first time you'd seen your baby? Like, what was running through your mind there?
So we'd gotten through the birth. I ended up birthing him kind of standing over the bed with the mat underneath, and then ended up, I think, getting down on my knees and for the final push of him really coming out. And of course, my husband was behind me and the midwife was beside me, and all I could think about was I just want to have a shower and go to bed. Well, my husband got to see, obviously, he was a boy. We didn't know he was a boy. So there was excitement coming from behind me. It's a boy, it's a boy. And then all of a sudden my mind went, oh my gosh, is his palate affected? So I just start yelling, is his palate affected? Is the hard palate affected? Of course, the pediatrician comes in, the obstetrician comes in, and immediately they just take your baby away. It's very different to allowing you to kind of pull your baby out, which you see, whether it's a C-section or a vaginal birth, and you generally get to hold your baby as long as they're breathing. That wasn't like that. I just took him straight away, put him over, I remember, on the side, and, assessing him, checking everything's okay. They probably were a bit over vigilant, to be honest. Like, they didn't need to be that worried. He wasn't going to starve. There was nothing wrong. There's no open wounds. They're probably a little bit dramatic. They could have just let me have a moment. That meant that I had to rush cutting the umbilical cord, because obviously he's been taken further away from me. My husband wanted to do that. So that became really rushed unnecessarily. And essentially they called back and they were like, yes, hard and soft palate affected. And I swore. I just remember going, ah, and just being so annoyed, because I'm like, that's it. Breastfeeding's over. I got to get my pump on. This whole kind of world of disappointment just fell over my body. And I was like, I can't do this right now. I actually can't cope. I can't do this. This is all just too much. And essentially I didn't have to worry about it, because they want to whisk them off to NICU. They put him on my chest fairly quickly, didn't obviously bother trying to latch or have that bliss moment that you so dream of when you're a mum. And my husband knew exactly what I wanted for him when he came out. So he just went into dad mode straight away and left me. And I obviously had to find fracture tears that needed to be stitched up. So Hunter's already down in NICU. That was it. I think got like 60 seconds to 2 minutes with him or something. One photo. And I didn't see him again then for like ages. James was down there for like 5 hours because I had to shower, rest, all the mess that's everywhere, as you know. And it was just a very disjointed experience. And I remember thinking, having this overflowing love and heart for women that struggle when their baby's born or have postnatal depression. I remember thinking, I wasn't at that point. I remember thinking, this isn't good. This is not how you're meant to feel when you have a baby. And no one talks to you about not feeling good when your baby comes out. It's all these Instagram photos and these instant bliss moments and this love where you and your husband are crying and you get the photo. We didn't get any of that. And I felt very disconnected from my baby. It's now in a box downstairs in a room and everyone's watching me be a mum. It's awkward.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I can't even imagine, what was going through your mind for those 5 hours where you're not seeing your husband, you're not seeing your baby. Were you getting updates? Like, how did you know what was happening?
No. You don't know anything until your partner comes back, because they don't have time to go down there, check your baby, come back up and tell you. This is public holiday weekend, so they've got less staff, higher rates, different staff on duty, casuals, and then COVID on top of that. So he did come up after a good few hours and said, everything's okay, everything's happened as you wanted, like, how are you, all of that. And then obviously they want to get you checked into your other room. They want to get you out of the birthing suites because other women are going to come in. But yeah, it was different. And I had to really go through in my mind, once I'd showered and put my clothes on and got into my permanent room, in the other wing of the hospital, I had to, and he was now in NICU being looked after, technically didn't need me, didn't need my breast milk or food because technically he's now on a tube for fluids. I just had to rest, and I needed to now instantly go into, how do I hand express colostrum, which that's my one regret that I didn't do as a mum, was prenatal express. That is the one thing I really wished I empowered myself with, because it would have given me a bit more relief on the other side with backup frozen colostrum. But I had to go into this, learn how to start extracting my colostrum, putting it into a spoon, extracting into a syringe. And now I had to walk down to NICU to see my baby and put syringes on its pillow so they could squeeze it into a tube to feed my child. Like, it was a really weird experience, but I think my mind went into, okay, what do I do to make sure that my baby's okay? So I just switched my brain off, I think, at some point, and probably had a bit of an aftermath, sadness that lingered for a couple of weeks after that. But I was like, I've just got to get this colostrum. So I set my alarm for every 3 hours, wake up, squeeze my colostrum, take it down and see him. And most of the time I went down there, he was asleep. So I kept missing him and I didn't want to wake him up. So I'd go back up and I'd lay there. I'm like, when's he going to wake up again? It was just weird.
And how long was he in special care nursery for?
So Sunday night, Monday night, and the cleft nurse came in Tuesday, being a public holiday Monday. The general team for cleft babies, aka the cleft nurse, the surgeons, all of the team that run in the hospital, aren't coming in on public holiday Monday. So I had to wait till Tuesday. So as a result, he had to stay in NICU until they got the all clear from the team. And when the cleft nurse came in, she was mortified. She's like, why is this baby in NICU? Cleft babies don't go to NICU. Get him out of here, unplug this thing. She kind of got annoyed at the team down there. And as a result, that entire team had to go into a cleft baby training to know exactly what to do when babies are born. All the midwives got trained in bottle support, how to use the bottles. And all these midwives were coming into my room, seeing how we were feeding and all of these different things, because they're like, we've never seen this before. We didn't know this is what happened. And they all wanted to get trained so they could be better the next time this happened. So I kind of joke and say he created all this change, and he's a bit of a change maker and instigated all of these things to happen. The NICU thing I got through that and it was fine. And I'm actually kind of glad I experienced it, because if there's any mums listening and your baby has been to NICU for much more serious reasons than my baby, you're literally my hero. NICU mums are some of the strongest, bravest mums I've ever met, because it is a whole other world down there.
Yeah, and it always sends shivers down my spine whenever we talk about it. Were you and your baby discharged home at the same time?
Yes. So by the time the cleft nurse was in on Tuesday, I think that they had to just tick off all their, their sheets and everything. And I'm pretty sure he was up in my room by Tuesday afternoon, but we didn't leave till Friday morning. We had to do hearing tests. We had to do another heart check. They wanted to check one of his hips from birth. And then we also had to learn how to use these bottles for feeding that you can only access basically through one site, a very specifically designed bottle. So, of course, I had to learn how to use these bottles, and I wasn't discharged until the Friday, and he was born on the Sunday night. So we were in hospital for quite some time, probably for an average mum. And once he got the hang of using the bottles, then we could all go home together.
Have there been surgeries, and how many surgeries?
He had 2 surgeries before he was 1 year old. He had a surgery for just the isolated lip, so literally just bringing the 2 lips together and tucking under the nose, because it opens up one of the nostrils essentially on the left side. So that happened at 4 months, which is actually a little bit late for cleft babies. They sometimes get them in at 3 months, which under normal pediatrician care for general anesthetic, normally kids don't go under until they're 1 year old. So cleft babies is a very big exception in that rule, unless it's obviously an emergency, like something critical is happening. This is obviously not critical essential surgery, because he could live for a very long time without these surgeries. So that kind of was a blessing for me, because I wanted to push it out as long as possible. He was a bit stronger. He was a bit bigger. We'd got through more hurdles. You can imagine a 4-month-old baby compared to a 3-month-old baby. It's just so different. And then he had the palate repair, which is the hard and soft palate. I like to say it's like if you had a wound on your stomach and you zipped up a pair of jeans on the outside and it kind of sucked you all in and closed, I guess, like you say, like zip up your jeans and hold in your pelvic floor, kind of like that. It's like someone zipped up the skin on the outside of his cleft and brought the bones back together. And it took about 3 weeks to recover. And essentially then he didn't have a massive hole in the roof of his mouth. So food and liquids wasn't going up his cleft into his nose and back out his nose anymore. He was swallowing like we do, and it just rolls down the back of your throat. So that was obviously massive, because I was watching him eat by this point. He started eating at 6 months. This was at 8 months, the surgery. So he was chewing food from one side to the other. You can imagine trying to navigate around a massive hole in your throat. Like I try to navigate with a sore tooth. Like it's annoying.
And starting solids for babies is stressful as it is. I can't even imagine this on top of it.
I, again, found it as a moment to be empowered from the loss of breastfeeding and made it exciting. So when you feel like something's been taken from you, again, I chose to pump milk. So I get the same milk that my body was producing to him, but through a different avenue. And I just looked at the first food as that next exciting journey. I was like, wow, I can control what he eats, what I cook, what I prepare. And yeah, there was a lot of gagging and choking, and I think that's already scary, but he had a bit of an additional gag on top of that. And I would get that, oh my God, is he going to die? Like moment often, like every day. And then I started to get used to it, and you realize how strong they are, and their gag reflex is absolutely incredible, and nothing bad ever happened. And then of course it was repaired, and he's still sometimes gagged.
Gosh. Wow, what a journey. And has he got any more surgeries ahead?
Yeah. So technically as a child, they would be under the children's hospital till they're 18, but they're actually extending it now and trying to bridge the gap between a child and then moving into the adult hospital, because you don't want to move into a new team when you're 18. So they're trying to extend the team because they really believe that the child is with them till they're more like 2022. So this is a long planning that when you get assigned to your surgeon and your nurse, like these people are with you for like a decade. Like it's a very long journey. We obviously believe for the best always and hope that we can decrease the amount of need from them. But essentially, he still has a gap between his gum. So you know how like kids have their baby teeth and then they get their adult teeth. That's normally around 7 to 9 years old. He can't have his gum grafting until he's at a dental age. So essentially, he has a gap in his gum and it's shifted. So like he doesn't have his front teeth that go along like this. He has a gap on the left side. So it's actually lifted up. So when he smiles and stuff, people are like, his teeth are a little bit crooked. What's going on in there? I'm like, he hasn't had his gum grafting, which is where they take bone from his hip. It's pretty intense surgery. Take bone from his hip. They basically smash it up, make it into like this cool Play-Doh paste. And then they probably have to break the jaw a bit and readjust the jaw and then fill the gap with bone, which is absolutely incredible. But as you can imagine, for an 8-year-old, it's going to be a big one. And he'll be probably in year 1 or year 2?
Gosh, he's going to be a strong guy, isn't he? Like emotionally, and like he's just been through so much. He's a fighter.
He doesn't know any different though. He got pissed at me when he came out of the second surgery. I remember the look in his eyes, like, you took me in, we were having fun, and I came out, what the hell did you just do? Like, I remember that look in his eye, like, where did you just take me? But the older they get, the more that you can talk to them and they can process it, and you can start to have a mature conversation. So there's going to be more preparation involved this time. There's going to be more, how does this make you feel? So I'm aware that the next surgeries, he also has to get his nose reconstructed as well, because the tape that they use to stop the widening of the lip as a baby's head and face grows kind of kept it, sucked in, which is very effective, and it's genius idea that someone created. Unfortunately, where the plastic part rubbed, it actually tore through the cartilage at the bottom of my son's nose. And it was the first time they'd ever seen it happen to a child. Maybe it's just the way his mouth and his nose is shaped, pressing in and cutting the bottom of his cartilage. So we have to reassess in the next 2 years, how damaged is the cartilage? Can we tuck it under, and also make sure that it's not affecting the shape and the bridge of his nose growing, because obviously the top of the nose is quite heavy and it's supported by a rather thin little bit at the bottom. So that will be before the gum grafting. So that'll be in the next 3 years, and then the gum grafting will be at 9. Then he'll have to get orthodontal work. We'll have to get braces, maybe plate expansion, maybe check his jaw needs to be broken. And you just keep going as it goes on.
Yeah. And Caitlin, like, what you've been through, it's huge. And I just want to say well done. Like,
thank you.
It's not easy being a mum, and, all these decisions you've got to make and all this information you've got to learn on top of the normal motherhood stuff. Like, it's just huge. So you're doing such a great job. Tell me about your recovery after birth.
It was pretty bumpy the first 3 months, and there was lots of different medical intervention that was needed, and my stress levels were extremely high. I have a pretty high stress tolerance, but this really broke me. And I felt the physical stress affecting my body. My core was holding so much tension. It was like I was always clenching, even though everything was so weak from having a baby, and I wasn't sleeping properly because I was in pain. I was sitting upright a lot trying to hold my baby. So I felt physically sore because I have a journey of mild scoliosis. There's a lot of pressure that forms on my lower back, and holding a baby and sitting up in bed all the time, trying to feed and do things, it just added a lot of pressure to my body. And when I don't move, my body gets stiff. So it's like the worst thing for me. So I really struggled from that perspective. And then, of course, I was pumping 8 times a day. So there was the physical pressure of pumping on my body while also trying to navigate how to bottle feed. And bottle feeding, actually, you don't hold your baby in a very good position when you bottle feed. I tried to keep sitting him upright and leaning backwards. But when you're obviously bottle feeding one arm, so all my body got quite dominant on one side, and I got very lopsided. I ended up having to see a chiropractor like every single week for 12 months after he was born, because I just felt like I was a mess.
Wow. We were just chatting offline before, and you mentioned how you've joined FitNest Mama and you've been doing some of the exercises. How has that helped, and what have you done there?
Well, firstly, I wished I'd joined sooner. I don't even think the program was fully up and running when I needed it. So that is fine. I feel like I'm really exposed now for baby number 2. I just have become really aware since your program that I probably didn't work on my pelvic floor enough. I had extremely wide ab separation that kicked in my first trimester. I remember feeling the 48 hours that it was ripping apart, and I was in agony. And I just now have reflected that, man, I just want to work on my pelvic floor so much more for baby 2. I haven't gone and got a proper assessment yet. You're probably like going to slap my hand because I've been on the road. It is one of my top things I want to do. I want to get a proper assessment with a physio, exactly like you do up here in Queensland. And I really want to make sure that my pelvic floor is strong and I have actually recovered, or where I am at. And I want to keep working on, like, I did your exercises that are in your Facebook group. I've never felt more exhausted than sitting there and following your pelvic floor stretch exercises. I was literally so tired. I'm like, if someone was to walk past right now, they'd literally think I'm sitting here doing nothing. But on the inside, every single muscle in my body is trying so hard, and my brain was trying so hard. So I know I've got a lot of work to do.
So what Caitlin's referring to is, if you're listening, pelvic floor muscles, they're out of sight, out of mind. They're internal muscles to the body. I know after 3 children, I need to exercise them more than I do. And I know motivation or just remembering to do them is a challenge as busy mums. And so quite regularly, I jump into our private Facebook group and I just step everyone through a set, and just from start to finish, and everyone comments done, like, tick or done or finish, whatever. And everyone just seems to love that extra motivation. And so what Caitlin's talking about then is your pelvic floor muscles, they were done after that set, which is great because that's how we get them stronger as we take them to fatigue. Yeah, so that's great. Well done for doing that.
Yeah, I love that.
Because it's all a matter of chipping away, isn't it? As busy mums, I think we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves to exercise and, we need to do this and we need to do that. But at the end of the day, I think if we can give ourselves the grace to have that freedom to just keep chipping away, if we can't do a lot one day, that's fine. If we can't do it the next day, that's fine. But when you can get back to it, even if it's 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, if we can keep trying to be consistent and chip away when we can, I think that's the first amazing step to recovery.
Yeah, and I love the accountability of doing it with you in the Facebook. I love that it pops up, there's a notification. I love that other people jumping on. So I really love that kind of community sense aspect. But I also really love all this section that's obviously in your program, which is for postpartum, and it's for like the breastfeeding or bottle feeding and all the stretches for the upper body. For me particularly, rather than necessarily feeling like I've done this massive epic workout now, I just want to feel like I can put my shoulders back, that I can open up my pecs, that I can stand tall and strong, that I'm not got a sore hip from holding my baby, that I don't have a tension headache, that I'm just feeling stiff and sluggish. That's what really affects my mood more than just like, I've got to get out there and do like a 5K run. Personally, it's all about mobility and movement and feeling like I'm not stuck, because I get very stuck. So yeah, I've really been enjoying it. I have done other programs before that are Pilates related, and I'm really noticing the difference with you having obviously that complete physio expertise background, and even the way you talk through the different level 1, level 2, level 3. I'm even noticing how much more my brain is connecting with what you're saying and really using my muscles or activating my pelvic floor in a much clearer way than what I think that I've just been doing in just everyday Pilates.
Oh, interesting. Thanks for sharing that. If you could just share a couple of words, I'm putting you on the spot here, a few words of wisdom or, a piece of advice for pregnant mums who might be listening today, what would be your main piece of advice?
Well, I have 2. The first one is, like I said before, I'm a really big fan of prenatal expressing. It's super simple. It's cost effective. You can literally just buy packs online. I know this great girl, they're all my baby shower presents now. It's not something people ask for, but I don't care if they're friends with me, they're getting one.
Our second episode was with the lovely Susie Prout. We talked through preparing to breastfeed. So it's a podcast episode number 2, and it's all about preparing to breastfeed. And she talks about antenatal expressing. So check that out if you're interested.
Perfect. Well, I didn't do that, and I wish that I did. And I just think you don't know what's on the other side. And it's just so nice to have, like some people might prepare their food for their postpartum in the freezer. Prepare your colostrum. It's just, and if you don't need it, it's medicine, or donate it. Something beautiful will happen with it anyway. It's never a waste. And my second one is, just like you would when you buy a house or make a big investment in your life, you get all the details. You pick the bank, you pick the broker, you pick the loan, you pick what interest rate, fixed or interest only. You go through this massive process to really assess what is the best way for our family to make this purchase. And I see that with every decision in motherhood. When your baby's in a hospital, whether your baby's out of hospital, whether you're deciding what's the best way to feed your baby, whether you're deciding the best way to parent your baby. I just think there isn't only one way. There's so many different ways. And often we anchor in our time of need or desperation or weakness, of fatigue, to one person's advice, rather than getting many different avenues and pulling back into a little private oasis with your partner and your baby and feeling into what is actually best for you. And I really found that with my decision to pump, it would be very easy for a medical person just to come in and say, fed is best, use a formula, use a bottle, that's great. But it's like, hang on a minute, let me decide. This is my body. I've produced milk. Let me just go through all the different ways You can bottle feed and breastfeed. You can pump and formula feed. You could pump, breastfeed, and formula feed. You can make whatever equation you want that feels good for you, as long as your baby's healthy and growing. Like, that's just my biggest thing. Gather all your data, hide away, and then make your decision without people impressing on you.
Oh, I love that. That feeling of empowerment when you have the knowledge, and that knowledge to make an informed decision is amazing. So that is so good to finish on. Thank you, Caitlin. Can you please share, if someone wants to get in touch with you, or if their baby's also had this issue, like, where can we find you?
Yeah, so definitely if there's any mums out there that have had their child in and out of hospital, like, it's so nice just to talk to another, I say a hospital mum, but particularly if you haven't been able to breastfeed or you're making the decision to pump, like, I will be anyone's pumping cheerleader, because there's hard days, and I'll love you through that decision. But you can find me at Living the Abundant Way with dots in between. So at living.the._ whatever, abundant way. So I share about natural living and motherhood and health and wellness, and really love to advocate for like people like you and just all different amazing people that are really in this birthing motherhood space, that are educating in things that maybe we haven't necessarily focused on in the last 50 years.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible story. It's been great to hear everything about you and your little boy.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll chat to you soon.
Bye.
And before I sign off, remember, my team and I will be putting together show notes with all the links, including how to connect with Caitlin at fitnessmama.com/podcast. And also, don't forget, if you are pregnant, come and register for one of the free live pregnancy workshops kicking off every fortnight over the next few months. Free to register at fitnessmama.com/pregnancy workshop. Have a fabulous day, everyone, and I look forward to you joining me next week for another episode of the FitNest Mama podcast. Thanks for listening to the FitNest Mama podcast, brought to you by the FitNest Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at FitNest Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer: materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I'll see you soon.